Thank you so much for joining us. We're a large group, but I think we're just meeting the max of our numbers and we don't want to turn anyone away. Why don't we start in front of the title wall of the exhibition, if you could join me. Come join me, surrounding the space that is dominated by our glorious marble bust from Versailles. Has anyone in the group actually already been through the exhibition? So just a few. Okay, good, because that means a proper introduction, or a somewhat complete introduction is in order. So, welcome. One of the great pleasures of this exhibition, I always like to start with safety concerns. One of the important pleasures of this exhibition is how many paintings are unglazed, meaning not under glass. Please watch coats and handbags and tote bags very carefully, and please no hitting on the walls. Thank you. So, what is commanding this space but a glorious marble bust, which is here from Versailles Palace outside of Paris. And in fact, it is probably the first time it has left the Palace of Versailles since it was commissioned in 1715. Commissioned in 1715, why that year? Prominently signed actually on the back. There's a beautiful chiseled cursive signature on the back, the artist's name, Jean-Baptiste Lemoine, and the date, 1715. So punctuating a date. And that is the date that is the inauguration of the Regency. The Regency was a time in France when Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, the namesake of our city, ruled in France as a transitional ruler until the young boy king, who was Louis the Fourteenth, came of age. And this period that Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, ruled France between 1715 and 1723 is called the Regency. And the reason he had to rule was because Louis the Fourteenth, the great Sun King, absolutist monarch, I see smiles, just the name, the Sun King, he was such a great self-promoter, everybody knows who he was, and built the vast complexes of Versailles, waged important wars, and really solidified power in France. He died after an extraordinarily long reign, well over 60 years, in 1715, and the young heir was only 5 years old. We'll look at his portrait in a moment. So, commissioning a work of art to punctuate an important year. So this is a statement of power, this is a statement of allegiance with continuity, and a statement of stability through the very nature of that. He's shown in ceremonial armor, the typical costume of monarchy and statesmanship. He is shown looking above and beyond. Of course, he's in a world and a realm beyond us. And white marble, just by nature of its materiality, communicates power. Of course, think of ancient Roman busts, just the bust format. Even on our coins today, of course, we use the bust format. And this gorgeous flourish of drapery, this kind of trapezoidal, commanding composition, is a direct quotation of a bust made by the famous artist, sculptor Bernini from Rome, of Louis the Fourteenth. So implicit in its very shape, size, and composition is all of this projection of continuity and power. One of the things I like to point out, look at that wonderful chin. There was a bit of heft there, but that chin very much communicates the part of the reputation that he was known for. This was a fun-loving guy. At his court palace at the Palais Versailles, his parties were epic. And this reputation was one side of his reputation. Another side was as a patron of the arts. In the end, actually, part of our project publishes an important political biography that reassesses this party boy aspect. But I can't help but think that chin tells us a little bit something about this wonderful man who was incredibly dynamic. And while we're a large group, I think I might just focus very briefly on this painting to elucidate why it is in tandem with this bust, the introduction to our subject. This is a fantastic grisaille, which is a French word meaning shades of gray. Gris is the word for gray in French, though it is browns, but it is still in this tradition of the grisaille. Because even though it was a full-scale painting, this was a model that was then delivered to a printmaker, and this was used on the frontispiece of a very large book celebrating the Regency. And so we can assume the Duke was involved in some way, and let's look at how he is presented, because the choice is very distinct. We have a Medallion Portrait, which is the most recognizable portrait visage of the Duke. He is being crowned. You see the laurel wreath of victory. He's being crowned by fame. Whenever you see trumpeting, think of trumpeting fame, heralding fame. And who literally, with her hand, holds this medallion is Minerva. Minerva, always identified by that glorious plumed helmet. And Minerva is not only the goddess of war, she is the protectress of the arts. So he is immediately presenting himself as an association with the figure associated with war and the arts. But let's go further. Below here, we see with the staff, with the fleur de lis that New Orleanians recognize well. So the staff of power, this personification with her foot on the books of law. She is rightful and legitimate rule. So again, punctuating and emphasizing the Regency as a time of transition. But who is on the right, with her back to us, holding a quill and a sort of what we would call a sketchbook, but is a palimpsest, is, you'll see here, the arts. You see the bust, you see the maul stick, the painter's palace. So again, this dual and precise presentation of himself as rightful heir and patron of the arts. And of course, for New Orleans, what's great about this portrait is also, of course, as a ruler of a global empire. Why all this globe shows Africa, which had colonial holdings, of course, New Orleans was part of that. And this painting was commissioned and made in the year of our founding, in 1718. So he's presenting himself as patron of the arts, and indeed, this is his reputation to this day. It is most what he's best known for. And when we see the arts, he was interested in opera, literature, theater, but particularly passionate in painting. Already in his late teens at the Palace of Versailles, where he was raised, we have accounts of him painting in his apartments. We know that his first major commission of the court artist, Antoine Coppel, who we'll discuss in a minute, was done when he was age 22. Philippe II dies at age 49. And at his death, that inventory tells us that in his palace, in just a suite of 6 or 7 rooms, were 537 paintings. And these paintings he had collected in just over 2 decades. This tells us a lot about this man and his passion for art. He wasn't buying willy-nilly, though that might suggest it, but he, in fact, had a great passion, and our show unpacks how we can actually think about the wonderful manners and in every way that he collected. He collected through purchases, working with dealers, working with artists. And this is our subject. The first room starts with placing us at his palace. You can come around on either direction. So we've made the choice to kind of situate our milieu, our locale at his court. And I mentioned Louis the Fourteenth, the grand palaces of Versailles outside of Paris. And so before the 1715 start of the Regency, the monarchy and aristocracy of France was outside of Paris. Part of what his Philippe II's reign does is bring cultural and aristocratic life back to Paris. It's a wonderful subtext of our story. And if you see in the engraving behind that I'm pointing to over here, that shows you a contemporary view of the palace. He had inherited the Palais Royal which actually was made a century earlier in the 1640s, and as that engraving so evocatively communicates, the Palais Royal was nestled in the right bank of Paris within the urban fabric of Paris. And so we can envision and understand lively court life, really in tandem with the urban environment. And the map on the left situates the palace in this neighborhood just across from the Louvre, where he installed the young boy king, Louis the 15th, and also where the Royal Academy of Arts was focused. So this room gives us a taste for that. Over on this wall over here, you have two pictures of totally different scales. One magisterially large on the right, and the other more intimate picture on the left, which actually is in line with the spaces in which they were installed at the Palais Royal. These were commissioned as part of the building of the Palais Royal in the 1640s. So works of art the Duke inherited. That's a little bit of the theme of this pairing. On the left is a quiet, intimate picture which represents the presentation of Christ in the temple. You have the Rabbi Simeon. Those of you that are closer can see the sensitive and thoughtful way in which he's playing with his beard. This is the moment before the Rabbi Simeon recognizes the Messiah. And this was one of the panels that decorated the chapel at the Palais Royal. Please note it is in its original frame. In all likelihood, the craftsmanship is extraordinary on that piece of oak frame. The painting on the right is one of 12 pictures that had decorated the Hall of Illustrious Men, which celebrated famous protectors of France. Of course, the Duke himself became a protector, and this was made by the prominent French artist who also worked in Rome, the great Simon Louis, in every way is expressive of his style, in its boldness of composition and form. Look at those wonderful, the profile of his face and those football shoulders, how we look at the figure from below and behind. It just communicates this kind of hulking power of this wonderful figure. This is a medieval protector of France, the Connétable de Chatillon, and matched by, as you'll see below, those wonderful calves. I mean, those are pretty awesome. You can see them. Yeah, I see you kind of laughing. And so the Duke inherited this Palais Royal, but what was the centerpiece of the palace was his hall dedicated to Aeneas. And the painting on my left, pardon all the turning around, we're going to, after this room, we're going to actually unpack and just look at a few selects of highlights. But I like reviewing this room. It really sets the scene. And again, if you'll turn a little bit, you can see a photograph over there, which is a reconstruction of the Great Hall. The Great Hall of the Palais Royal, or the Grand Gallery, which here, looking at the floor plan of the Palais Royal, which I won't review, but it's this grand hall. And it was designed to directly reference the Hall of Mirrors of Versailles. So this projection of power, continuity, and legitimacy. And what graced the barrel vault ceiling, which you can see in this reconstruction, was a glorious painting by Antoine Coppel, his masterpiece, in fact. Antoine Coppel was the young artist that the Duke studied painting with when he was a younger artist. And they collaborated actually on a book illustration project, and he later became the Duke's court painter. In every way, their relationship is vital to our understanding of the Duke's passion for art and the formations of his taste. What we see here is, of course, not the ceiling itself. The ceiling was destroyed, but this is the model or version of the ceiling that the artist kept, that went through the hands of his descendants until it was given to a French museum. This work of art has only left its institution once and never left France. It is an incredible nom, and in every way suggests the grandeur of the centerpiece and the glorious Palais Royal. What we're looking at is, it was all painted. You have fictive architecture done in trompe-l'œil or fooling the eye. Look at how the artist has done these wonderful sculptural kind of column or myriads and enlivens them with expressions through paint in a way that you can never achieve with sculpture. And then you have the central oculus, this grand opening up to the sky, which is in every way referencing the ceiling paintings this artist would have studied in Rome, so also bringing Rome to Paris. And what we're looking at is an assembly of the gods, gloriously crowned in a halo of light, projecting that strong gesture with his hand is Zeus, or this is a Roman scene, so Jupiter, always identified by the eagle, also majestically presented next to him. And then we have this assembly of the gods. Look at Hercules over here with those wonderfully highlighted muscles and his enormous club. That's actually almost bigger than himself. And here we have Venus, the goddess of beauty and love, and she is supplicating, so she is trying to convince Zeus to bring her son home safely, who was Aeneas. Aeneas, one of the mythical ancestors of the founding of Rome. And so what is the Duke doing in this series of paintings dedicated to Aeneas, both on the walls below and above? He's associating himself with the grandeur of Rome. It's quite a statement. Let's go on to the next area. Then you encounter and then turn around to see our suite of paintings and rooms as the exhibition continues. This kind of niche or area, simply for our visitors, is to elucidate the Regency. You see, we have a very brief explanation there of what the Regency was and who our cast of characters were. We have Louie the 14th, represented by a wonderful portrait in NOMA's permanent collection, one of the rare and the best representation of Louis the 14th when he was young. There are many, many portraits of him, but the best ones, he's already an old man. Here, he's just so vibrant and just kind of has such kind of penetrating intellect and was really considered quite handsome. Facing him, theoretically and literally, is our Duke d'Orléans, so Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, who is also the regent, right? In my talk, I refer to him as the regent, the Duke, or Philippe, just to say that. And here is our charge, Louis the 15th. We've come to talk about him here as little Louis. Because he is just little Louis, isn't he? Of course, he is resplendent in these robes, which completely envelop this young boy. And he's, of course, we see all the symbols of power. Look at the glorious textures, the velvet, the carpet. The carpet, also how the pile of the carpet, the textures change as it comes out at us. And, of course, he's gesturing in a moment of power. But look at that lip. He's kind of got this petulant, I'm doing this on a ruler. I love that little detail. You know, you kind of wonder what that's about. And these glorious robes, underneath it is lined with ermine fur. Ermine is very, very rare, and these are small animals. So sourcing ermines, I mean, to have, by very nature, this such a voluminous cape says everything. And of course, he's got his royal order, which is also represented by this garter. When you enter an aristocratic order, the garter is actually part of that, the kind of ensemble of symbolism, of symbols that you wear, along with this gorgeous sheathed sword. Notice how the sword is placed next to the garter. That's actually kind of interesting. And he would have been wearing cotton stockings. Cotton was at this point a really great luxury item. And the Duke commissioned this painting in our year, this image in our year, 1715. So you understand very much now this trio that we put together to communicate the Duke's emphasis on the importance of the Regency, the stability of power, and the continuity and stability that he is forming as part of the Regency. And this court painter, Hyacinth Vigo, who was the great court portraitist, he had done a very famous portrait of Louis the 14th that had a very similar gesture of the leg coming out and the grand robe. So it's also very much referencing that famous image. So starting with the heart of the matter behind us here, This part of the exhibition introduces the rest of the exhibition that unpacks different aspects of our Dukes collecting in smaller, bite-sized mini sections. But this first section presented simply, we have a lot of open, what we call floating walls, and highlighting, which is how the show is really structured, to really boldly bring out and emphasize the glory of these works of art. And encapsulated here is all the trends of the Dukes collecting. I mentioned already at a young age, I mentioned our numbers, 537 pictures in those rooms on the plan that I showed you. But how did he collect? Well, he collected, he bought through dealers. He was often given gifts, diplomatic gifts, often for political favors. But they weren't giving him porcelain or silver, they were giving him paintings, which shows, of course, that everybody knew what his passion was. And this painting over here by Louie the Fourteenth, who that graces the cover of our catalog, was an important gift from the Duc de Nantes, who then, after a gift of 3 pictures the following year, gets one of the most important political appointments. Sounds pretty familiar. And it's a wonderful piece that's rarely found. It's here from the National Gallery of Art. And this artist was known particularly, and a group of painters around him, working in Bologna in northern Italy and in Rome. They were known for the intimate approach to religious subject matter. Notice the close crop-in, notice the Christ child looking directly at us, notice the soft, intimate mood, complemented also by this leaning virgin and her head leaning, and then her ways in which the virgin and child are leaning in, kind of protecting in a way the sleeping saint. On the left is Saint Catherine, identified in the lower left corner. You see that spike by the, that was her torture, a big spiked wheel. And this is Saint Catherine asleep, having a religious vision. So this would have been in a personal home, while it's quite large. And so as part of a meditation of prayer, you are seeing the faithful would see a saint having a vision. And that was the idea, is that also through your prayers, you would have a vision. So this incredible intimacy that this artist was known for. And this glorious picture by Guido Reni, which is the student, who is the student of this fellow, also of this Bolognese school, is here from Norfolk, Virginia, and is likewise an extraordinary piece in its bold coloring and modeling, the tight composition and planes. The artist is bringing you through the picture in very specific ways, and a very deft compositional structure. It is very tight, but look at its wonderful state of preservation when you come back through the galleries. These gorgeous, lush, gestural topography of this man's sleeve. And this painting is here, I should say, from Norfolk, Virginia. Part of our story, and something we tell you at the beginning, is that our Duke in the Regency collected this extraordinary group assemblage of objects. Throughout the generations after him, his son, his grandson, the collection becomes increasingly famous in Paris and, in fact, throughout Europe, and is on view at the Palais Royal. His great-grandson, on the eve of the French Revolution, has many debts and political motivations, and he chooses to sell the collection. He views it as his birthright and his main asset. And that collection is sold and dispersed via some sales in London in the 1790s, which we'll explore in the last room. But so that's kind of our story arc, which really ends with the dispersal. And this here is from Norfolk. So paintings from this collection that we've reunited, and paintings that are out there, are in public collections across Europe, the US, Australia. There's even one in India, by the way. And part of what our project has done is trace as many paintings as possible to present locations. I see a question.
What's the subject matter?
Pardon me. This is King David and Abigail, called The Meeting of David and Abigail from the Old Testament story. Here's King David. Abigail has come to plead for her husband. Her husband is in the armies opposing King David, and she comes to plead for her husband's survival. He ends up being killed in the battle, but King David falls in love with her after this interaction, and they do end up married. And Guido was known as the divine Guido. He was thought to really be touched by divine vision, and I think in every way Abigail's sweetness, her profile, the marmoreal treatment of her face and its purity,